Is professional property management really worth it? This is a question I see a lot of newer investors struggle with because if you're thinking about real estate investing for cash flow, you're also focused on minimizing expenses. So I'm going to address this issue in this next video. Hi, I'm Veronica Woods. Welcome to my Real Estate Wisdom channel, where I talk about all things real estate investing and overall real estate market in the Philadelphia metropolitan area. We're always giving tips about how to build a profitable rental property portfolio, as well as keeping more money in your pocket, whether you're buying or on the selling side. In this video, I will answer that question: is professional property management really worth it? Now, here's the thing: most people miss out when they're evaluating their options between self-management and professional property management. Professional property management is an investment. It's not an expense. It's an investment to help you grow and scale a profitable rental property portfolio. It's not a short-term expense that you should try to avoid if you, at the end of the day, are going to make more money with it. And I'd be more than happy to have a larger or broader conversation about growing a profitable rental property portfolio. You can give me a call at the number in the description area of this video. But now if you go back to just thinking about self-management, is usually an option because you think it's going to save you money in the short term. But what I have seen over watching clients as they onboard with my company or houses on the market for sale, their rental properties, is that a lot of times if you don't have a system in place to do the right property management activities consistently over time, you're actually going to lose money and lose value in your assets. And that's not why most of us get into real estate investing, to lose money. Let me share this example with you. I had a client who came to me after realizing that she could not handle managing the properties on her own after a serious medical crisis. It was actually her daughter who hired me to help manage the properties, which on paper was quite an impressive portfolio of properties. But when we lifted up the covers, we could see that there was going to be a lot of work to be done. After probably about a decade of the tenants managing themselves, the properties were collecting below market rent, and those tenants paying the below market rent were behind. There was a laundry list of repairs to be done. And the reality is that this didn't happen overnight. This was kind of a year by year erosion of profitability because the owner wasn't able to consistently run the rental property business as a business. And that's one of the big things to point out. A lot of times people get on a high when they first buy the properties and maybe do spectacular over the first 6 months. But then when you get into year 6, there's signs, or even beforehand, there's signs of not really consistently running the best property management practices. When you're asking whether a professional property management is really worth it, you're really asking, can I do it as good or better than a quote-unquote professional? Now, I think there's some questions that you should ask yourself. Take a hard look at those answers before you make that decision. The first is, are you good at putting systems in place? Systems around what does the property manager actually do? And a lot of people point to they collect the rent and they dispatch contractors to do repairs. There's a bunch of stuff in between that gets done that's just as important to have systems around. For instance, at the starting point, do you have a legal and thorough way to screen tenant applicants to make sure you're only signing leases with qualified tenants that have even the potential to stay long term? Once the tenants move in, do you have a consistent place to document all your communication with them in case you need to reference it at a later date? Then, what's your process to manage renewals, manage tenants moving in, tenants moving out? And in Pennsylvania, the move out process, let's say, you have to return their security deposit within 30 days. So you're on a strict timeline with that move in, move out process. So that's important. Then lastly, one overlooked thing is, so you may have a great lease, but do you have a process in place to monitor whether the tenants are actually following the rules? Because if you just have kind of puffery in your lease, you have a strong lease, then you have no way on earth to actually check up or bill the tenants if they violate something. It's in thin air. It's useless. So that's the systems that a property manager, a professional property management has along that can really help grow your rental property business. The second question you should ask is, are you familiar with all the local legal requirements of being a landlord? Do you know the proper procedure if you have to evict a tenant? Do you know the annual requirements for landlords? In some municipalities, it could be just a rental license. In some, there's a full property inspection. In Philadelphia now, there's a requirement to do this lead paint dust inspection that wasn't a requirement a few years ago. You don't want to be caught not knowing the right thing to do and find out that you're operating a legal rental, so to speak. And one mistake around not knowing the license or the requirements is a lot of times people, I can self-manage. I'll just get a local handyman to be my property manager, or I'll get a realtor who really just does leases. They'll kind of be my property manager. Now, if they aren't up to date in all the legal requirements, and just because people are experiencing a segment of real estate does not mean they know property management. And because I definitely have seen people get themselves in trouble by getting poor advice from someone who just really wasn't knowledgeable enough to advise them. The third question is, do you really have the right personality to manage your rental properties yourself? Are you able to manage and maintain a business relationship with tenants that can run the gamut of know-it-all, fact check you, Google you with any legal requirements, to those that are looking for a charitable heart? Eventually, everyone has to have a tough conversation about enforcing some part of the lease, whether it be a pet that enters the property that wasn't in the lease, or someone gets behind in the lease and they're telling some dramatic story. At the end of the day, you have to be ready to have that tough conversation, whether it's December when it's cold outside here in Philadelphia or it's July. And you also have to make some tough decisions about when you need to cut ties with tenants. A bad tenant relationship is like any other bad breakup, but you got to do it. And sometimes you have to make the trade-off from a business perspective. It may be better to lose a tenant paying subpar rent or just pay with a subpar payment history for the opportunity to get a higher rate tenant who's going to do a better job of complying to all lease terms. And sometimes it's tough because people think like, I don't want my property vacant, but the bad tenant, again, is eroding that value of the property. It's a business after all. The last question is, do you have enough legitimate time to run your rental property business alone? You really have to think about it. Can you manage all the things that could possibly come up from your lunch break and weekend to take phone calls and be able to effectively run your business? I think in this age of technology, people really believe that all you need is a smartphone and you could run your entire rental property business without speaking to someone. I tell you, I love technology, but there are some times when you actually have to talk to people at inopportune times. And I'm not saying the 3 a.m. text, because although it has happened to me, it's very rare. So that fear of people getting into the rental property business of the 3 a.m. text, it's a little dramatic, but it's really just even managing from 8 to 6, and being able to effectively look at or monitor what contractors are doing, coordinate between multiple parties to get things done, respond to city requests if needed. All those things, it's really hard to just kind of really segment that business to being done on your lunch hour and weekends. And ultimately, a lot of my clients, that's one of the main reasons that they turn to professional property managers, because they have their life, their family, their jobs are just too demanding to be able to effectively run it like a business. And so they acknowledge that the opportunity cost of them handling certain things in their profession, is higher than outsourcing it. And so a lot of times that's ultimately what it comes down to. Do you have enough time? And some municipalities actually require you to have a local contact if you live a distance away. In your rental license, they'll ask you who is the local person that they can contact, because they know that they're going to want to be able to contact someone quickly if there's an emergency, or like I said, if there's some kind of follow-up request that the city requires. Now, once you answer these questions for yourself, you can then make a well-informed decision whether professional property management is a true investment to help you grow and scale your assets, not over just 6 months, but over 20 years. And like I said, one of the main takeaways from this video I hope that you get is that professionals just bring systems and allow for more consistency in your rental property business. And that's really the main advantage. There's nothing that any one task that's quote unquote rocket science, but there is something to be said about putting systems in place that can be duplicated and done to scale. So the reality is that the right property manager can save you time, can save you money in terms of troubleshooting things early before they become bigger problems, and also attract better tenants, because tenants want to live in places that they have the perception of professional property management, even if you are self-managing. So those are all important points to remember as you're kind of considering self-management or professional property management. Now, I don't want to say that all professional property managers are created equal. So you definitely have to do your due diligence and pick the one that's a right fit for you. It's definitely not a commodity service. No matter how much, people may focus just on pricing up front. It's not a commodity service. It's really a partnership with someone that's going to help you make money and grow your business. At the end of the day, having the right business partner early can set you up to manage your rental properties no matter what happens in your family life or professional life over time. Now, if you want to learn more about how to set the right rental rates so that you can help that top line in your cash flow, you want to check out the video that's appearing on your screen now. Thanks for watching. Happy investing.